What's up, agency owners? Jason Swenk here. And on today's episode, we have an amazing guest, fellow Coloradian. If that's a word, I don't know. I just moved here, so I don't know. But we're going to talk about how she's grown her agency so quickly and go over some of the strategies that have worked for her and some of the things that might not have worked. So it helps you avoid them. So let's go ahead and get into the episode. Hey, Ellen, welcome to the show.
Glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, excited to have you on. So tell us who you are and what do you do?
Perfect. I run a business called Tough. We're a small, fully remote growth marketing agency, partnering primarily with startup scale ups, helping them get traffic and grow their revenue. We focus on tactics like Google Ads, technical SEO, content, creative, Facebook ads, CRO, and email. Really trying to figure out how to test quickly and then operationalize small wins into long-term sustainable growth.
Awesome. And so, how did you get started creating your agency?
Primarily through freelancing. I think that's probably a common story. But I had done in my career prior to freelancing corporate marketing, worked at a ad tech startup, worked at like a really small startup as a head of growth, and felt like there was an opportunity to start an agency like Tough, but wanted to hone in on my own kind of experiences, primarily from an executional standpoint. So I freelanced for about a year and a half, some consulting to strategy work, but a lot of executional work, running Google ads, running Facebook ads, writing email copy, trying to just kind of hone in on the services that Tough was going to provide initially. And then got to a crossroads where it felt like I had enough money in the bank. I knew I didn't want to ever take capital as I started Tough. And so I pretty much planned to have enough money to pay myself a salary as well as two other people for 6 months, even if we didn't, sign a single client. And at that point, about 3 years ago, decided to start Tough and put the freelancing work to the side.
Awesome. So, who were the, not particular names, what were the roles of the two people that you hired first and why?
Yeah, two people. The first one was a PPC strategist, somebody to take over a lot of the day-to-day executional work I was doing for clients, Google ads, Bing ads, YouTube ads, that type of work. It allowed me to take off one hat and pass it to somebody else. The second hire was crazy to think about now, a non-revenue generating employee, somebody to help us with people ops. I do think that if you're serious about building a remote team and a small team, you have to put a lot of foundation in place. We worked on a career framework. We thought about hiring processes. How do you set up benefits? How do you think about compensation? What's equitable? How do you create an inclusive hiring process? Just spent a lot of time getting that in place before we started actually thinking about building a team.
That's great. No, that's really great. That's the first time I've heard someone bring on like an HR type person as their second role. I thought you would say like project manager, and everyone always thinks they're not billable. I'm like, they're billable. I don't know why no one thinks that, but I usually tell people around the 10 person mark to get the HR, and people usually are shocked. They're like, "Oh, I thought you had to do that much later on." But I think, like you explained, I think a lot of people think they're just doing paperwork and they're
Mm-hmm.
not doing all the other things to make sure you get the right people because the people in the agency are the most valuable asset.
Especially in a service-based agency, I think it's people work with Tough because they like the experience of the team members here. And if you don't get that right, and you have a lot of employee turnover, the cost of hiring the wrong employees is astronomical, if you ask me. And so I'd rather get it right the first time around.
Yeah. Well, do you guys feel that you got it right on the first couple hires? I know, man, I hired so many of the wrong people. I got rid of a lot of the right people too, for many, many years because I didn't have that person.
Yeah, we really struggled in the beginning, mostly because we had a strong process for hiring, I feel, but didn't really know what we wanted. And I think that goes back to as well as being a kind of first time founder, never working at an agency before. We hadn't really established our playing field. So we were kind of like saying yes to every opportunity. We were doing any type of service that we could offer. We were just trying to generate revenue. And I didn't have a clear enough picture around what we actually need out of team members and what kind of like the long term vision and who the right client is for Tough. And we kind of paralleled those. And as it became more clear around where we get the right results and the types of clients we want to work with, it becomes a lot easier to hire because you know exactly what you're looking for. But in the beginning, it was a cluster. I was
Like,
just shocked anybody wanted to work with us, to be honest.
yeah, I think everyone has to go through the cluster. It's like that Vegas buffet. You're trying out everything. What was the pivotal, or do you remember the pivotal moment where then you got that clarity?
Yeah, I think it probably happened about 18 months ago. And two things became really clear. If I was going to continue to have any chance of growing tough, we had to figure out how to hire talent that's adaptable, autonomous, more senior in position. So, not people that we'd have to train extensively in the beginning, who had experience working on small teams. So, really honing in on characteristics versus job responsibilities. And that's been really helpful. The second thing would be, how do you create a more repeatable formula for generating new business? I think when you have a more predictable look at revenue and growth, it becomes a lot easier to then make strategic hiring decisions early versus waiting to kind of like feel the pinch and the stress of like, oh gosh, we've got a lot of work, we've got to hire somebody else, or this whole thing's going to collapse. You can get to a point where you slowly get out of that and get ahead of it with hiring. And you can't do that unless you can predict what the next 6 months is going to look like.
Yeah, building a predictable pipeline is everything, right? Like if your business is built on word of mouth, which I always joke around saying that's just not scalable, um, and you're relying on other people, then you're going to take on work that you probably shouldn't be because there's no such thing
Mm-hmm.
as a bad agency client, only a bad prospect or a bad process. And so when you can build that predictable pipeline, it makes things a lot easier where you're picking and choosing. So let's transition to that. What's worked for you for building a more full pipeline?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. I think more than anything, what hasn't worked, I have found at least with tough, testing and experimentation was a much quicker route to finding what was going to work. And I think in the early days, we relied a lot on word of mouth. Larger agencies, we tried to like kind of like um, create
Yeah.
partnerships for any clients they didn't want.
Ooh, that
Um,
that doesn't work.
no. Let's see. I put on workshops. I went to events. I would like get in touch with people that I'd been connected on with LinkedIn. We tried outbound sales. Saw some success there, but definitely not like a natural skill set for me. So a bit of a stretch. So we tried a whole bunch of different things for about a year. Got exhausted, and finally realized, how do we generate more inbound leads and have healthier conversations and get people knocking on our door and getting curious about working with Tough and wanting to work with Tough. And so we started getting really specific with an SEO strategy. So that took, that's a slow burn. It's not like paid acquisition. It's not like referrals. It takes a long time to build.
Mhm.
It was a schlep. But now when you go onto Google and type growth marketing agency, you're going to see Tough in the number one spot. If you type content strategy agency, technical SEO agency, YouTube ads agency, we're going to be in the top three. And now we're lucky and humbled enough to have 75 leads knock on our door a month, and we maybe take on one or two. And I couldn't have predicted that level of scale ever. But the organic acquisition has really been important for us.
Very cool. Yeah, I always tell everybody it's kind of like as you're building and growing the business, you got to experiment with what's not working and then kind of go back to kind of the basics and really build on that foundation. And what we found too, because a lot of times in the very beginning when we were growing our agency, we grew it from being in the search engines and people coming to us. And
Mm-hmm.
then when we started wanting to get to the next level, we started realizing, man, we need this outbound channel. Man, we need this
Mm-hmm.
strategic partnership channel. If Google changes one thing, we're toast. And then we're laying off a lot of people. So it's always a work in progress.
Yeah, I couldn't echo that enough. And I think we kind of, like we partner with clients every day to think about growing revenue and acquiring new customers or users for them. And we try to apply the same process to Tough. So we do quarterly growth marketing strategies. We stay pretty committed to it. But I would say we're like in that moment right now, Jason, where 75% of our leads come from organic traffic. And when you think about having all of your eggs in one basket, it's terrifying. And so we're starting to get at this point where we're capturing a lot of existing demand. How do we start to create a little bit more demand, and what does that look like for us long term?
Yeah, I almost even look at it too of like when I hear 75 leads a month, I'm like, okay, good. Well, like,
Mm-hmm.
how could I make them even better? or how can
Hmm.
I even
Hmm.
convert them more? Like I was talking to Darby, our scale specialist. I'm like, well, out of the conversations that you set up, like how could we, of the ones we want, how do we increase that conversion rate just a little bit?
Hmm.
It's
Hmm. Hmm.
always those little fine tweaks that work. I'm gonna ask you something I've never really asked anybody that I'm gonna start doing on the show. What's a thing that you've regretted that you haven't done in the agency yet?
For the agency?
Hmm.
That's such a great question. I think this is very tactical, but I apologize. It's top of mind. We didn't add on our creative team until recently. And in the growth game, we're really metrics driven, data driven, thinking about tactics and the strategies behind those. But if you don't have really good creative, you're not going to get very far. And for so long, we outsourced that, not really trusting in our processes, not really understanding what that would look like in house, and we didn't bring it in house until about 3 months ago. And now I'm like, oh shit, we need to triple that team tomorrow.
Hmm.
And so I think I would have just looked a little bit more holistically at our services and figured out, again, it just goes back to how do you exchange the most value and where can your team be the strongest. And I was slow to pick up on that.
Awesome. Well, Ellen, this has all been amazing. Is there anything I didn't ask you that you think would benefit the audience?
Nope, I think you've covered it.
All right, perfect. What's the website people can go and check out the agency?
Toughgrowth.com.
Awesome. Very easy. Everyone go check it out. And if you like this episode, make sure you guys subscribe. Make sure you hit the like button, comment below. And if you guys want to be around amazing agency owners on a consistent basis where you can grow your agency faster because you can get their opinions and then they can share what's working for them so you can scale and grow faster, I would like to invite all of you to the digitalagencyelite.com. This is our exclusive mastermind where the agency owners are growing very, very quickly and having a fun time doing it. So make sure you go to digitalagencyelite.com. And until next time, have a swank day.